Ymedia.
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 Stay tuned with Ymedia.
Ymedia is a media company. With 360-degree approach in reaching the audience over 8 media platforms. Television, Channel Y Canada, 24/7, available nationwide. Toronto, Ottawa.
Welcome to Ymedia. Today we're here.
Hello everyone, my name is Yudhit Jaswal. I'm the group writer at Ymedia, and at Ymedia we have launched a series of episodes by Y City. At Y City we are covering the municipal elections 2026. Of course there are other topics as well, but as we approach the municipal elections, which is happening on 26th October this year, we are inviting a lot of mayors from different cities. We've almost, I guess, touched more than 20 mayoral candidates, and we will carry on interviewing all the candidates for mayors for different cities, councillors, regional councillors, and we will also invite some poll strategies as well and some analysts as well. You can watch all this coverage on Y Plus, a 24/7 all English channel. You can watch on Channel Y across Canada on Rogers 857, Bell 828, Telus 2418, and on Ignite 707. All this coverage is also carried on FM 105.9 Radio Y, and a lot of this discussion is also published in Midweek newspaper. You can pick your copy of Midweek anywhere across GTA. And our digital platforms, y.media. To talk more about this, I have our associate editor with us, Ramona ji. Ramona ji, a warm welcome.
It's great to be here. It is an election season. There's so much going on, from municipal elections to by-elections federally and provincially, and a lot of leadership races taking place right now throughout the country. So it's great to have this conversation today.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time. We have elections, by-elections, and of course the municipal elections as well. And who better than David from Liaison Strategies. David, a warm welcome on Ymedia. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I know you're doing a lot of poll surveys as well, so we thought to bring you on board. And let me tell you that Liaison Strategies has done recent poll surveys for provincial level. They've done poll surveys, what's happening at the federal level, and they're actively engaged with the municipal elections as well. David, why don't I start with you? Your poll survey recently for Mississauga. Bonnie and Caroline Parish, they're tied neck to neck.
That's right. And if undecided was a candidate, they would be tied for first as well. Among all voters, we're seeing Caroline Parish, 26%, Bonnie Crombie, 26%, but also undecided. 26% of voters are undecided right now. And of course, we're seeing Councillor Deepika Damerla in third place, Councillor Alvin Tejo in fourth place. So the race is quite competitive. And I think especially when you look at the top 3 candidates, all women, all familiar names, people who have appeared on ballots in Mississauga for a long time.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing here is, as much as Bonnie Crombie and Caroline Parish, they're tied right now, but we also thought Alvin Tejo. I was surprised because he's at the 4th position. We've seen some numbers grow for Deepika.
That's right. We've seen some growth for Councillor Damerla. We did a survey in October of the top 10 cities in Ontario by population. And of course, Mississauga was included. Brampton was included too. And in that survey, Ms. Damerla was doing a bit, significantly worse, I would say. So here she's doing a lot better. But I think we also have to put things in context, which is the by-election that took place. Councillor Damerla got 19% of voters. Here, among the decided voters, she's at 18%. So she's more or less been able to hold on to the voter coalition she had for the by-election. Councillor Tejo in the by-election had 25%. Here, he's a lot lower at 12%. So this is where a lot of the Bonnie Crombie support has come from, is from eating into Councillor Tejo's support and his voter coalition. Worth noting as well that the mayor won with 31%. Right now she's at 35%. So she's had a little bit of growth, but not too much.
Yeah, I'll come to you, Ramonaji. Are you surprised with these numbers? I mean, Carolyn Parrish and Bonnie Crombie tied neck to neck, and then you have Deepika and then Elvin Tacho at the fourth position.
No, definitely not surprised at all. But the question I have is this survey was done with 1,000 respondents over IVR, correct? It was from August 11th to the 12th.
That's right.
Yes. Question being, were these were the 1,000 from eligible voters?
So we're always screening for, this is a good question. We're always screening for three things in this context. One is, are you a Canadian citizen? Are you able to vote? The second is, are you at least 18 years old? Because if you're not 18, you can't vote. I'm so sorry. And the third being, do you live in Mississauga? Because our methodology includes random digit dialing, we're including cell phones, we're including landlines. But we want to make sure, especially with number portability these days, you can register a number in Mississauga and move to Brampton the next day. Want to make sure people are actually Mississauga residents. So all of those things were checked for all three respondents.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great to know that these are all eligible voters who live in Mississauga and are able to vote. So that's great to know. Now, going back to your question, Yudvir, yeah, this is not surprising. I mean, Bonnie Crombie is a well-known name. She's been a mayor and she's been around consistently for a very long time, and just recently as the Liberal leader. So it's not surprising to have her numbers be so quite high. Now, what will be interesting is to see where the difference will be made up in the coming weeks, because now we know that, residents are going to be paying attention after Labor Day. That's when people start paying attention, when kids go back to school, and then the activity of the campaigns pick up a lot more, and we're able to hear their policies, and the debates are coming up. So we are going to see these numbers change a little bit over time. But to see this, benchmark numbers, not surprised at all, because she's very well known.
Yeah. What do you think, David, is going in favor of Bonnie or Carolyn Parrish? What do you see their? How do you see their strengths? Even Deepika or Alvin Tacho as well.
Well, a lot of municipal politics is name recognition, and so to the previous point, these are people who have a huge amount of name recognition. Three of them ran in the by-election. One was just Ontario Liberal Party leader, and has been in the news a lot this week as well. Of course, yesterday we learned about the Premier sending someone to Jamaica to look after Bonnie Crombie. That, just to be clear, that news story would not have been part of the survey, because we were out of the field by the time that story came forward. So she might be doing a little bit better now if people are sympathetic, or maybe a little bit worse if people are asking themselves, what was she up to during this vacation that they felt the need to send an investigative team? But regardless, I think there's a lot that's instructive in the numbers that are not in the top lines. When we ask people, is Mississauga going in the right direction or wrong direction, more are telling us wrong than right. When we look at the approval ratings for the Mayor Parrish, more disapprove of her job performance than approve. So she is underperforming right now, her approval. More people approve of her than are currently voting for her. But the reverse is true also, that if you look at the global picture, there's a lot of negative sentiment in Mississauga right now about how the city is trending. So I think she has a lot of room to grow, but also there's a lot of risk that this anti-Carolyn Parrish vote could coalesce with either Bonnie Crombie or Alvin Tajo or Deepika Damerla.
Since you mentioned that Premier did send someone, just for the record, I would like to say this, that he was asked that in the press conference. Premier denied having any knowledge, but he said yes, he knows. He said yes, that's up to the party. He also said that stuff happens during elections. Not sure why would he say that, but he's trying to clearly distance himself. Just for viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you that the news was broken by Trillium. They mentioned that there was someone sent to spy on then Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie in Jamaica, and $3,000 were spent. But Premier definitely acknowledged that you have to ask this question to the PC party. As last time when I checked, I don't think so. The Ontario PC party has made any comments on this one. But how this will play out for the Mississauga elections, of course, I heard the opposition questioning from NDP Merit Stiles. She was saying, imagine a woman in politics and you're sending someone to spy there. What could be happening right here in Ontario? Premier Ford also said there was media following him in states in different cities. That's what his point was.
Yeah,
Please.
and I think, the premier has previously said he would send an army to make sure Bonnie Crombie was not elected. This is one of the questions we asked in the survey, and some of these questions were collaborations with the Toronto Star. They wanted to know, would that endorsement make an impact? So we asked respondents, if the premier endorsed a candidate for mayor, we didn't tell them which one, but we said if he endorsed someone, would that make you more likely to vote for them, less likely? Would it make no difference? An overwhelming number of Mississaugans told us they wouldn't care. And an even bigger number told us this would actually be a negative for the candidate who received the endorsement. Only about 13% told us it would make them more likely to vote for that candidate. So, the premier's endorsement and his support could be very valuable in terms of donations, in terms of volunteers, but also a lot of Mississaugans want a mayor who will be independent of the province. And I think he could get himself into a little bit of trouble there with some of these stories that are coming out. And maybe it's possible that Bonnie Crombie could get some sympathy from people if they think she was mistreated when she was leader. But as I mentioned, none of that is in this poll because that is all stuff that happened after we were out of the field.
Okay, great. Ramona, I'd like to ask you, what's your take on all this? Do you think the news that has broke now regarding PC party, that's what they're saying, PC party sending someone over to spy on the then Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie in Jamaica?
Well, yeah, I mean, it just shows that the PC party was worried about the new Liberal leader, Bonnie Crombie, at the time. And so to go collect evidence, I mean, why would you spy? It's to go collect evidence, to track the person's movements, to see their whereabouts, ins and outs. Now, why would you do that while the person's on vacation? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you're going to set up surveillance, wouldn't you do it when they're in the country? But this is bizarre. And I think it's yet another scandal right now for the PC party because they used funds that they weren't supposed to. It wasn't out of pocket personally. It was taxpayer funds that was paid for the spying trip, it appears to be. So they're going to have a lot to answer for that. Premier Ford said he didn't know about it, but someone did because someone expensed it and it was approved. And so that's neither here or there. I don't think that really affects this mayoral race. That's a whole nother topic. But I'd like to go back to the poll here, which we have, I'm looking at the question on the direction of Mississauga. When asked about, is Mississauga going in the right direction? 32% said yes. And then you have 46% that said no and 22% that said not sure. And so to that, I could see, you have Carolyn Parrish who won a by-election, 2 years ago in 2024, replacing Bonnie Crombie. So you'd have to actually beg the question of, this sentiment of 46% of Mississauga residents and eligible voters who believe that Mississauga is not going in the right direction. Well, that kind of falls with the incumbent previous to Parrish, who was there for about 10 years as mayor, right? So there's a lot of things that still need to be answered because you can't really fully remove Bonnie Crombie from the state of affairs in Mississauga because she was at the helm for a very long time. And the current incumbent's only been there for 2 years. So that I think that would be really important to see, as potentially, hopefully, in a follow-up survey, you would say, well, who do you think takes most of that blame, being at the helm of the city? Would you say that this is attributed to previous mayor Bonnie Crombie for about a decade or current incumbent mayor Carolyn Parrish? So that would be an interesting part, which creates a lot of gray area for me that it would be great to know in a future survey.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and also I'm just
Really good suggestion, by the way.
yeah,
That's
a good suggestion. That's a very good point. You have to add something because go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would just say, it's a really good question as to, do people believe she's had enough time to really affect change? And I'm talking, of course, about Carolyn Parrish. She's only been there for 2 years, more or less. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's going to be a judgment call for people. Again, there's some numbers in this survey that are very good for Mayor Parrish. There's other numbers that are more troubling. And sometimes, you just have to look at the numbers in the splits and say to yourself, what is the winning number here? She won with 31% last time. She's at 35% now. She could win with 35%. And even if only 32% of Mississauggans think the city is going in the right direction, if most of those are voting for her, it all works out. It's a lot of candidates in the field right now. So the way that the vote splits take place will be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I'm also curious to know when you're making this headline, the city turns negative, or the residents were questioning the direction of Mississauga. What exactly are they questioning?
Well, this is a very standard survey question that we field in Toronto, in Ottawa, and that we fielded in 10 cities in October. And so the benefit for us is having that October data set that was done 1 year before the election to coincide with the anniversary. But also, when we look at the numbers for Toronto, in Toronto, they're even Steven. 46% say it's going the right direction, 46% say it's going the wrong direction. In Ottawa, it's a little more negative as well, but it was trending in the right direction more or less in Mississauga in October. So we've seen a big change since the last time we surveyed. And I think when we look at Mayor Parrish's approval numbers, she went from having a positive approval rating, a net positive, I should say, to having a net negative approval rating. So things have really taken a different sort of turn. And part of that will be the campaign and the fact that there are now ongoing critiques from people running for mayor who are making the case that she's the wrong person for the job. And she, of course, is saying, no, I'm the right person for the job. So we're going to see a lot more of that friction, I think, in the debates.
Yeah, Mayor Callan Parrish was here at our Channel Y studios recently, and I did ask her. I said, from Markham to Vaughan and in Brampton, there's not much of a challenge there in those cities. Toronto, we are seeing some challenge there. We'll talk about Toronto also later on. But I said, why in Mississauga? They're all looking for your job.
Yeah.
I said from Bonnie Crombie to Deepika Damrela and Alvin Tadjo, they're all looking for a job. Why is that? And obviously she had, and I'm sure our audience, we can share a clip of that, what she had to say about that, why they're looking for that job. But I'm still intrigued to know what is the issue here? What is the issue here? Of course, there are challenges in most of the cities, whether we talk about the affordability, the crime, property taxes. All these are issues. They're definitely issues in Mississauga. But are there any specific reasons that the resident will say Mississauga is going in the wrong direction? And to Ramonaji's point earlier, that who would they pin the blame on? Whether it's the current mayor, she's just been there for 2 years, or is it Bonnie Crombie?
Those are good questions, and I think looking back at our October survey, I'm glad we did it, because back then we asked what was the top issue for Mississauga, and we've repeated that question here as well. Where we've seen a lot of the movement take place is affordability and taxes. A lot of concern about crime has it's still there. Don't get me wrong, people are still concerned about crime, but at the same time, it's not the number one issue anymore, or the number two issue. It's really fallen off the issue priority list. I think we're seeing a lot of sticker shock for people who are living the lives, they haven't changed what they're doing, but they go to the grocery store and things are more expensive. They're seeing the price of gas and it's more expensive. Property taxes are getting more expensive. And all of these things are adding up. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of generational issues right now. Grandparents picking up more and more of the support for their grandkids because the parents are being squeezed. And we're seeing, in many cases, people deciding not to move out, younger people having a very hard time in the job market. And all of these things are sort of combining to create a lot of financial stress, not just in Toronto or Mississauga, but right across the country. And I think we still have a lot yet to see. We know from economists, there's going to be more sticker shock coming in October, right as Mississaugans are voting. So I think affordability, taxes, we have seen some property tax increases in Mississauga that were a bit larger than previous ones. But to the mayor will tell you these were necessary to balance the budget. Mississauga, for those who are not familiar, cannot run a deficit, right? So it doesn't have the same tools that the province or federal government has. Things are a lot tighter, and it's also, to a certain extent, constrained by the arrangements of Peel Region, right? And Mississauga cannot just act on its own. There's also this regional government that can download different costs to the city. So all of these things really creating a perfect storm of affordability, where it will be very tough for candidates to suggest new spending.
Yeah, I did discuss this point, because cities can't run a deficit budget. You don't have much options. And I'm asking this question for almost every single mayor, and many of them from Burlington to East Gwillimbury, Barrie, Vaughan, they all do want other options. I said, I don't know how creative can you get on that side, but they all want some support from the federal and the provincial government because it's getting tougher by the day. But Carolyn Parrish, she said that she's not the one who's going to freeze the property taxes, but she also has an ambitious plan as well. So I'm going to ask both of you, starting from you, Ramonaji, this time, and then over to you, David, as well. She also has an ambitious plan. She wants to bring in a soccer stadium, 8,500 capacity. I asked her, of course, a soccer stadium is definitely welcome, but will it be a multi-purpose? The cricket one as well. She said, no, it's going to be a soccer specific because she says, in the region of Peel, we might have a cricket stadium in Brampton. So she said they'll serve the cricket thing. And she, planning to tear down the whole Living Arts Center, have a huge place built up there. You'll have the conference center. And she says that's going to create a lot of jobs there, billions of dollars investment coming to the city center area in Mississauga. So I asked her, I said, that's an ambitious plan. But Carolyn Parrish said, no, she believes that can be done in 4.5 years. Ramonaji, your take on this.
Well, I think you need to definitely have ambitious plans if you're going to have an incumbent, running as an incumbent, but also your biggest challenger is the previous mayor, right? You need to have some bold visions and some bold ideas. And, for a long time, I've even advocated on many other shows that we've discussed is that you have Toronto Pearson Airport, right? It's Canada's largest airport with destinations across the world, direct flights to some of the key destinations. And so, Toronto, and in this case, Mississauga needs to have this hub where it is able to, have conferences, have international, attendance coming to its conferences, but needs the facilities. It needs, your 5-star hotels. It needs, state-of-the-art convention centers that are able to have that level of activities take place. So I think it's a positive thing, right? Because, you have the Canada's biggest airport with, many direct destinations to key cities for business and trading hubs. And so why wouldn't you have a vision for where Mississauga could go? I think I've said this to you personally, had Hazel McCallion, the late mayor of Mississauga, written a book about what she did to Mississauga to turn it to, a municipality that was in the outskirts of the city of Toronto and now raise it to the level that has become with its skyscrapers and really the level of development, had there been a playbook, that would have been the playbook had she written, from her experiences. So it's important, I think, for mayors to have a vision for their city that it would be a place where people can live, work, and play. But you do need those bold visions, especially when you're going to have a competitor such as the previous mayor vying back for her job again.
I completely agree. I've always been very bullish. I'm a strong supporter of bold visions. I'm not saying that Carolyn Parrish has a bolder vision. I'm sure other candidates would have their vision too. But whether it's the city of Toronto, look what LA is trying to achieve at least, and US in many cities, we saw the Copa America soccer there. As much as I enjoyed watching Brazil, Argentina all play, then we had the Cricket World Cup there, and now we had FIFA Soccer World Cup. Amazing infrastructure, witnessed there in US. Now they're having LA Olympics. So of course the cities get involved, whether it's the Copa America or the FIFA or the Cricket World Cup or it's Olympics, and you build some amazing infrastructure, across different cities. Huge stadium is being built in LA, a cricket stadium. I mean, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, a Bollywood star, Shah Rukh Khan, building a huge cricket stadium in LA for the LA Olympics, I wouldn't have imagined this. So I'm always for the bold vision rather than, we're trying to fix the roads here. Great, fix the roads, that's fine. But have some bolder vision for the cities. These are big cities, please.
Well, I'm a big supporter of athletics. I think we need more facilities for people to be able to really get experience and have a place to practice, a place to have championships and different regional events. I think the worry is going to be how this translates to voters. And I'll use Ottawa as an example right now. In Ottawa, the mayor, who's not doing so well in the polling either, he proposed a big redevelopment at Lansdowne Park. And this would affect where women's hockey is played in Ottawa. A lot of survey questions that we've done there for the Ottawa Compass, all of them showing us the same thing. People do not see this as a priority right now. And in fact, they're having a very negative reaction to it. Right now, the city is in Ottawa, is asking for an additional levy to fix roads, sewers. This is what's being discussed. And people there also being squeezed. And so they're going, you need more property tax dollars for sewers and roads, but you're using the existing property tax dollars to build a stadium. And, in the end, the city of Ottawa will not be the one owning and operating this thing to a certain extent, because there's all these partnerships and different organizations. They're not seeing the value in that. When we ask them, where do you want the cuts to take place? Over and over and over again, they're telling us, cut Lansdowne Park, cut Lansdowne Park. We don't want to see this luxury redevelopment. I think the challenge for Mayor Parrish is going to be to explain how this development for the Stalker Stadium translates into jobs, translates into return on investment, and is not some luxury recreational facility that the city can't afford. Because at the same time that she's proposing a stadium, people are very cautious about property taxes. And we've seen this in the survey that we fielded as well, where we asked people, would you want to see more investment in policing if it meant higher property taxes? And when they have to make that trade-off, that difficult choice, people are saying no. A lot of people want low taxes right now because they're very nervous about what's happening with the economic picture. And of course, all taking place as we hear more about Trump tariffs, as we see more sort of battles with the United States, and a lot that has yet to be resolved there.
Yeah, you're right in a way, because the pocketbook issues do matter a lot on day-to-day basis, and you just mentioned Trump as well. We'll talk about that as well. But I asked the same thing to Carolyn Parrish, and her point was, there's already $2.5 billion. That's what Mississauga brings in. Those are the tourism dollars. And she's expecting those tourism dollars. Once all this thing, you tear down the Living Arts Center, you build a huge conference, there's soccer stadium that she's talking, and so many other things that she's talking, a hotel and everything over there. So she's saying, this will bring in $5 billion worth of tourism on an annual basis. That's what she's claiming. I'm not sure how.
It can be a very strong plan. The question now is, who will communicate that plan the best? Will it be Carolyn Parrish, who is able to convince Mississaugans this is a really strong vision and it's a good investment? Or will it be her opponents, who probably, I don't know what they would have to say, but I imagine some of them are going to say to Mississaugans, we don't need this right now. And if we don't build this, we can have lower property taxes. So that, I think, will be the debate. And I think it'll be interesting to watch that take place in September and October.
Great. Ramona, your final thoughts on Mississauga, and then we'll move on to Toronto, and then we'll move out for the federal polls and the provincial polls as well, please.
Yeah, to this point on spending, I do see, based on the poll, that that the top concerns here are affordability, taxes, housing, and crime. These seems to be the top four that consistently Mississauga residents and voters really care about. Now, the question being is that with these big, bold vision, there's also, did Mayor Parrish talk about, is that funding coming from the feds? Is it coming from the province? Is there some sort of funding that's coming her way for some of these big projects, and that could potentially offset some of the costs when it comes to taxpayers, the local taxpayers? Did she explain that?
Actually, she did. She says there are a lot of investors ready for that, but she didn't elaborate too much on that. But I'm sure she said she's done her homework. She's bringing in someone who's already done this work in other areas as well. And she was quite confident that this will not really increase the property taxes as well. Rather, she was saying for the property taxes, this was her point, almost $1,100 if my memory serves me right. Yeah, it usually does. I'm usually bang on. Yeah, she said $1,100. That's the amount per property that they're saving because of the $2.5 billion on the tourism, and she is expecting that to be a lot more once this tourism dollars that she's bringing from 2.5 to 5 billion. So this, she's claiming they're already saving $1,100 per property because of this 2.5 billion.
It's an interesting argument, but
Okay.
most of the tourism dollars, I'm not saying the mayor is wrong, but most of the tourism dollars that we saw brought in by the World Cup end up with the provincial government and the federal government. It's a very small amount that the city of Toronto was able to receive, and also the other cities as well. And that mainly comes in the form of the hotel surcharge. You pay a little extra for hotels during special events sometimes, and they have the hotel levy. But most of the tourism dollars is spending on restaurants and businesses and for tickets to events. And what the government receives from that is GST and PST, right, in the form of the HST. That goes to the federal government, that goes to the provincial government. So I think she will want to figure out how to present this plan to Mississaugans. And I think excellent point being made is if the federal or provincial governments are going to invest in these facilities as well. But when you talk about tourism dollars, it's important to remember, almost all that money goes to the federal and provincial government. So the municipality can build it, but the real benefits are going to be for the other levels of government.
She also mentioned, since you've asked about the funding, Mayor Kellen Parrish also mentioned there'll be a very major announcement of funding probably towards the end of next month. So she already announced that here at Ymedia. I think this is the first time she made this announcement. Maybe she knows it better. Maybe she's not at the liberty to speak what sort of announcement it is. But she mentioned here that's the announcement, and probably obviously there could be a rise. Some gas tax dollars as well. City could get their share from that as well.
Listen, I think she has. There's a lot of time to talk to voters and to explain her vision. And I think as we get closer to election day, she'll probably release a platform. There will be some level of costing. So I think we'll see more details from Mayor Parrish soon.
Yeah, and I'm also interested. We are going to organize the debate as well. Last time, Carolyn Parrish, she didn't show up for the debate. We had around 6 other candidates who did show up. But this time, let's see how it goes, because we have, as you just mentioned, the race is tied neck to neck. So at Ymedia, we are going to organize debates here as well at Y City. So we will be inviting all the candidates from Toronto to Mississauga to Brampton and other areas. We will be organizing some debates this year. But as we just mentioned, that Ymedia is all set to cover this municipal elections like no other media on print, digital platforms, on Radio YFM 105.9, and definitely on Channel Y, broadcasted right across Canada. I think we quickly need to move on to our next city at Y City. So we will talk about the city of Toronto. The race has gotten quite exciting this time because we have other candidates are there, but primarily I would say 3 of them. I would say they are the main contenders. It has gotten interesting because we have now Chris Alexander as well. So Olivia Chow, Brad Bradshaw, and Chris Alexander. So your recent poll survey, what did it say, David?
Well, Olivia Chow is leading the race with 47%.
Yeah.
Brad Bradford, second place at 40%. And then Mr. Alexander at 10%. I'm sure some viewers at home are doing the math. They're saying, where's the other 3%? In Toronto, we give people the option of someone else. There's 40-something other candidates that are registered. 3% of people telling us they might vote for one of those. So it's a lower undecided rate, around 20% in Toronto. And what we're seeing really is Olivia Chow doing very well in downtown Toronto, Mr. Bradford doing very well in Etobicoke. And then in Scarborough and North York, we're seeing a lot more competitive races. Sometimes Mr. Bradford coming very close in Scarborough, sometimes Ms. Chow doing very dominating North York, but moreover than not, it's gotten closer and closer with every passing month. So a lot of questions about Toronto.
Yeah, and Chris Alexander, I know he's announced that. So do you think the voters towards the right of center, that will be divided there?
Well, it's very early. And so far, Mr. Alexander has not been able to claw into Brad Bradford's support. That doesn't mean he won't. It just means it hasn't happened yet. And, he's only been in the race for about 2 weeks. So he's got plenty of time to work on this. What we are seeing, though, and this is a very similar situation to a certain extent as Mississauga. In both cases, you have an incumbent who won in a by-election. And there's a perception of weakness because they won in a split race. So sort of differences between Carolyn Parrish and Olivia Chow. Olivia Chow has a net approval rating right now. She's at 50% approval in the city of Toronto. Direction of the city is split, 46% saying it's going the right direction, 46% saying the wrong direction. But then again, you have a mayor who won with around 30% support, who's now polling at 47. So she's done a good job of expanding her coalition. At the same time, Brad Bradford really did not do well in the last election, got less than 5% in that by-election. But he's been able to consolidate that anti-Olivia Chow vote so far. So that's the big question, I think, is Mr. Alexander going to be spoiler? Or is he going to try to make it a three-way race? There's 18% of people voting for Olivia Chow right now who are voting for her, despite the fact they do not approve of the job she's doing. There's 36% of people who are voting for or 33, I should say, percent of people who are voting for Mr. Bradford who don't like him or don't know who he is. So that is the opportunity for Mr. Alexander, is to go after these voter pools and, of course, the undecided voters as well.
Great points on that one. Ramona, what's your take? What's your analysis on the race in Toronto?
Yes, of course. I did have a few things on Mississauga, which we'll come back to after we do this part. But I mean, with Chris Alexander, I mean, the last time he was in politics was about 10 years ago. And it didn't end so well. If you recall, he was the minister in the Harper government in that 2015 general election. And that was a time where you had that unfortunate image that's, you know, and our hearts go out to it, of that boy who came, you know, his dead body was at the shore. And this had to do with asylum seekers coming into Canada at the time. And he was the immigration minister at the time. So then immediately it just connected to him in terms of what's taking place at that time, and him being at the helm of, you know, how many are they able to bring to Canada at the time. So it didn't end so well for him. And then he ran for leadership, if you recall. And that was the first leadership for the Conservatives after that 2015 defeat, where Justin Trudeau went from a third party status for the Liberals and brought it to a super majority. And then he didn't do so well either there. I think he got about 2% of the vote there when it came to the Conservative members. So, and he's been out of politics for about, you know, a big part of 10 years in terms of like politics that would be relevant for us to pay attention to. So he's got a long road. And, you know, I had a really close friend of mine who once said this thing to me that I'm going to share with you right now that really stuck in my mind, is that he described politics like, you know, being an athlete, right? In sports, like a competitive athlete, and said, if you step out of playing for a few years, your body's not going to have the same sort of, you know, quick reactions and your ability to play. Whatever sport that may be. And he's like, same thing happens with politics. When you step out of politics, you're losing touch with the voters, you're losing touch with the organizers, the political organizers, more to be specific, community leaders. And you really need a lot of that, right? It's not just one person, it's a massive organization that it takes for one person to get elected. So it's a long road for him, and it's an uphill battle, I would say, and it's a very short period of time. You know, we're looking at 2.5 months, and people are not paying attention until probably mid-September, and things will really peak, you know, towards the end of September, early October. So he's got a tall hill to climb, you know, to say the least, even though, yes, he was a GTA MP, and hopefully he would still have some of those connections to be able to, you know, mobilize, you know, people on the ground in Toronto. And to that point, you have, you know, Brad Bradford, right? He's known in Etobicoke, not necessarily known for the rest of the city of Toronto. So when you have, you know, a counselor that is still not also known like Brad Bradford and generally all of Toronto, you can even see what an uphill battle it is for Chris Alexander. And then you also have Olivia Chow has the incumbent advantage, the fact that she's an incumbent and she was widely paraded around what we just saw with FIFA World Cup, which was super advertised. You know, she's been there. So she does have a lot of advantages, even though she, you know, lacks some support in certain areas. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens when, you know, we go post Labor Day, kids go back to school, or, you know, parents go back to their normal schedule, and then the news cycle picks up this election schedule a little bit more. And then, of course, it's up to us to be able to talk about it a bit more and to be able to let our viewers and listeners know about what some of these policies are that they stand for. And we take it from there.
Okay. And what do you think are the important, David, issues what the Torontonians are?
Well, we're still seeing a lot of focus on affordability, a lot of focus on taxes. Crime, especially in Toronto, has remained a dominant issue, much more so than other municipalities we've been looking at. But also transit is a big component. Traffic and transit together end up being, in the low 20s when you look at Toronto polling numbers. I think there's been some real success stories. The Eglinton Crosstown, for instance, so far so good. We haven't tested it out in the winter, so we don't know yet how it's going to perform with snow and everything else. But definitely it's been a big improvement over the Line 6 and the Finch West LRT, which of course has had a lot of problems, but is now getting sped up slowly but surely. The mayor has talked about capping transit fares, which is an interesting proposition for the affordability agenda. But we haven't seen a lot of affordability talk from Brad Bradford yet. A lot on Sankofa Square, a lot on bike lanes. That was his latest announcement. And a focus really on some minor issues, but we haven't seen a lot yet. And I think we will see more come September or October. I think despite the fact Mr. Alexander has entered the race, Mr. Bradford has been able to narrow the race by another point. So if you're in his campaign, so far so good. If you're Olivia Chow, you're saying, well, I'm still leading. So far so good. And if you're Mr. Alexander, it's your first poll, you're starting in double digits, 10%. You're not in contention yet, but maybe you can do something in the debates to really ignite a fire or spark attention. So I think also, so far so good. It's an interesting survey because I think everyone can be happy if they choose to. They can also choose to be unhappy, but there's good and bad for everyone in that one.
I don't see much of a difference, and it's too early. I mean, Bradford at 40, and then you have Olivia at 47%. Though there's still a 7% lead there. But we're pretty early in the race here, and things could change. What do you think? What do you think, in your opinion, that this could be the tipping point, or this could really cut it for Bradford?
I really think the debates are going to be really important in terms of providing more information to voters about who these people are. I think Olivia is very well defined. Mayor Chow is certainly a known commodity, was a trustee, was a city councillor, was a member of parliament, was of course married to Jack Layton, who was the federal leader of the NDP. This is a very well-known person in Toronto politics. Mr. Bradford, there's more definition. When we look at undecided voters in Toronto, only 4% of them have a positive impression of Mr. Bradford. Most of them don't know who he is. So there's a real opportunity for him to make inroads there, but only if he's able to brand himself positively before Olivia Chow or some of these third-party groups like Progress Toronto, before they can get involved. And I think the debate will be a really great opportunity for him to showcase what kind of mayor he would be. Of course, it also contains some risk because if he comes across too partisan or too mean, that could really turn some people off.
I'm just also intrigued to know, as Ramanujan, I'll start with you this time, why Chris Alexander, he's been away from politics. Of course, he's been quite active as an investor, as a diplomat, then as a cabinet minister in the Harper government. But after so many years, why he would suddenly jump in the race? And he knows he's has to cover a lot of ground. Why would he do that? I'm just curious. Ramanujan.
I think it's the same theme, right, that we're seeing in Mississauga. Why would former Mayor Bonnie Crombie, former Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, try to come back into municipal politics and get her old job back? Why would Chris Alexander, after 10 years away from politics, try to become a politician again? It seems to be a recurring theme that previous politicians who don't win seats try to get other seats in different elections, it seems like.
I asked this question to Mayor Parrish. She says Bonnie tried her luck everywhere. She's not getting any job. That's why she's coming back. I don't think so. That could be the reason. But yeah, that's what her answer was for Bonnie Crombie. For Chris, I'm not sure what possibly triggered this thing. But do you think Chris Alexander can really cover the distance? Because from sitting at 10, 15, 20, 30, at least I think he'll have to move to be a serious competition around 30, 35% in that zone for sure. He has to cross that 30 percent mark. And Ramonaji, same question for you as what do you think, how competitive this race could become between Olivia and Bradford, please?
Well, I think, to David's point, yeah, as a benchmark poll, 10% is not bad for not being relevant for the last 10 years. 10% is not bad. It is 1,000 people that they, ran this poll on, and it is I would assume it's also eligible voters in the city of Toronto, correct, David? Yeah, so that correct, sorry?
That's right. It's everyone is
Yeah.
screened for voting eligibility, for residency.
So, a benchmark at 10%, the only way is up, right? Hopefully, depending on when some of the policies come out, and we'll see what their traction is. I mean, there's an uphill battle because he's going to need a team, right? He's going to need people who believe in him, and he's going to need to have fundraising power to be able to, no money, no campaign, right? So that's the other thing. So these early poll numbers really indicate to investors, or sorry, not investors, that's the wrong term, donors, in terms of where to give their donations and how to back a candidate. And so there you have it. But in terms of, usually what we've seen traditionally in Toronto politics is that it's usually really a two-way race. And there's always an incumbent advantage, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the coming weeks when people are paying attention. And what that also means is that these campaigns are also going to start advertising, in some time to be able to get their message out there, and at the same time really reveal their policies. And then that's when, if their numbers come up, if in terms of a two-person race, then that's when they'll start going negative campaign against each other, and that's when things will get really interesting. So we won't really know until, I would say, end of September, more early October, to see where these campaigns go in terms of their strategy and their messaging.
Yeah, and I'm also interested to know, we had certain discussion regarding the airport, the Billy Bishop one. Ontario government announcing that yes, we're going to go ahead with that, and then Olivia clearly campaigning that she doesn't want that, and then the federal government intervened. They said yes, and then we had Minister Prabmi Sarkaria saying we're going to go ahead with all this. So is that in play here during the municipal elections?
Well, I think to a certain extent, the airport for now is paused. The province can say what it would like to say, but it's a federal jurisdiction. If the federal government doesn't sign off on it, it's not going to happen. I think you've seen from a lot of the local Liberal members of Parliament in Toronto, they were quite happy when the airport was stopped. They put out some very aggressive statements against the airport once the decision was made. And of course, the government did a consultation, and 80% plus were opposed. So I think they have to ask themselves, if they want to go ahead with this, are they willing to pay the political price from the people who are very motivated to stop it? For Olivia Chow, the math is really easy. Her vote is concentrated in downtown Toronto. And, Spadina Harbourfront is a particularly good area for her. This is the riding, the ward that has the Toronto Island and has all the people who live on the waterfront. She can't afford to alienate these voters. And they are deeply, deeply opposed to the expansion of the airport. So for her, the political calculation was quite clear, putting aside whether or not it would be good for the city, putting aside the effects on the environment, the effects on housing, because of course, you would have to revise a lot of condo projects that are being built right now to lower the height of the buildings to accommodate for additional flights and for an airport expansion. Put all that aside, the political math works out really well for Olivia Chow. Her voters don't want this. She's on record in previous elections being opposed to this. So for her, 1 + 1 equals, 2. This is an easy equation for her.
We've heard from Premier Ford, but for Mississauga, do you think any favorable candidates for Premier Ford in Toronto?
This is a really interesting issue as well, because the airport's in Mississauga. We've got Pearson. They made a lot of investments to Pearson. They're expanding capacity. And there's a really tough question to be asked here about how much economic development and activity does Billy Bishop have compared to Pearson? Some of the studies are a little difficult to believe when people are claiming that Billy Bishop does as much economic activity, proportional to its share as Pearson does, because we see the real economic activity of Pearson. It's gigantic. I was just at Billy Bishop recently in the last 3 weeks. It's a very small airport. Even if you were to double it in size, it wouldn't be able to accomplish even 10%, 20% of what Pearson does. So I think it's a really interesting conversation for the region. And of course, there's other airports they could expand. In Hamilton, of course, being a good example. A lot of people already fly into Hamilton to try to save a little money. They could certainly do more there. But for me, the question really is, what is the economic case and how are voters reacting to it? You know, in polling we've done for the Toronto Star on the airport, people very evenly split. But when you ask them, are you prepared to sacrifice parkland, housing density, parts of the lake? Very opposed to any of those individual components. So they like it until they have to pay a price for it.
Yeah, we'll carry on the discussion on why media, why city. We are going to discuss most of the cities here, but Ramonaji, I'll start with you this time. What do you think about? I don't think so. There's much of a competition in Markham for Mark Scarpetti, David West, and Richmond Hill. Then you have Stephen Del Duca and Vaughan. Not much of a competition for now, at least even in Brampton for Patrick Brown. These are the cities. Of course, we could have a very interesting race in Hamilton. We have candidates from there as well coming to Ymedia Studios. There's some other interesting races that I see as well. Maybe Caledon could get interesting, who knows? And then some interesting races in other parts as well. We have an interesting race in Burlington too. I know we're going to do the poll for that as well. In Burlington, we had the sitting mayor. She was here, Marine Weed Ward. A bit of a tongue twister, Marine Weed Ward, but she was here. We did discuss about Burlington, but many of these races, and then the 905 corridor, not much of a competition. Ramona.
That's a very interesting point, but I think there is something to say on that, is that when you look at these numbers, right? Like I'm gonna just make reference to Chow's numbers here on the questions on the poll, is that do you approve or disapprove the job Olivia Chow is doing as mayor of Toronto? You have 50% that approve, and then you also have 43% that disapprove, right? And that, even though it's not a statistical tie because it's plus minus 3%, I believe that's what I read. And then you have not sure at 6%. So that shows that's very decisive, right? When you have just 6% at not sure, then voters know how they feel about this candidate, this incumbent candidate. And then when you look at, do you think the city of Toronto is moving in the right direction or the wrong direction? You have 46% saying in the right direction. Then you also have a tie at 46% saying the wrong direction. So what this is showing to me is that, the average voter has discontent, right? Whether it's in the city of Markham, Richmond Hill, Brampton, or other cities, it's just they're not seeing a viable opposition to an incumbent. And unfortunately, in municipal politics, it's a popularity contest, right? As long as you're well known, you could be there for a long time. And when it comes to competition, other candidates think it's just very hard to defeat you, which it has been, right? So it's very hard to go up against an incumbent mayor. But what it's showing, these numbers are showing, is that the average voter is saying, we're not really happy. This isn't like a big, nice 80% report card or even a 60% report card or a 70%. It's just, we don't know what is a viable option other than this incumbent running again. And that's what we're seeing in places like Markham. That's what we're seeing in places like Richmond Hill and places like Brampton and other cities, except what we're seeing in what could be taking place in Mississauga as an extraordinary thing. But when you compare it to Brad Bradford in terms of his name recognition compared to Olivia Chow, we discussed this just a few minutes ago. It's not the same, right? Even though he is a counselor, an incumbent counselor, but it's a whole nother thing to be recognizable brand name in all of the city, in this case, Toronto. So I think that's what we're seeing. So I don't know how long this is going to go on for, where people are just going to be like, well, what other choice do we have? And then, and we're seeing that the turnout, when it comes to the voter turnout, it's about 30% on average in some of these municipalities, right? So, as long as the incumbent is pulling out their votes, right, in terms of their supporter, they're crossing the line without really a big challenger in place. So it'll be very interesting to see if anything will change in this election or in the future elections, because, I talk to people all the time. I'm very politically active, and I'm hearing with incumbent mayors that they're not so happy. It's just they think it's a big vacancy because there's not a big enough challenger in some of those other cities that you mentioned.
Yeah. David, your final thoughts on the city of Toronto, and then we'll move to our next topic.
Well, we'll have debates. We'll have debates. We'll have platform announcements. I think there's a lot more to come in Toronto. And I think, to the previous point, 50% approval, 43% disapproval, that's a margin of 7 points. It's the same margin of 7 points that we're seeing in the decided vote between Olivia Chow and Brett Bradford. So 7 really coming up quite a few places in the report.
Great. We'll quickly move on to our next topic at Ymedia. Ymedia Political Sensex. So welcome to Ymedia Political Sensex. Here we will be discussing about the numbers that are done by Alliance Strategies for the different federal political parties. Liberals are maintaining a consistent lead. I was just reading an article this morning about Pierre Poilievre and his ability to really take down Mark Carney. That's a question there. But I'll welcome once again both our guests here. Welcome back, David, once again at Ymedia Political Sensex. Ramonaji, warm welcome once again at Ymedia Political Sensex. And we will start with the federal politics, but then at Ymedia Political Sensex, we will talk about the numbers at the provincial level as well. David, that I think that should be the ballot question now. Is Pierre Poilievre ready to take on Mark Carney?
In a word, no. It's not going very well for him. His negatives are quite high and steadily getting worse. Recent weeks of polling have shown his negatives spiking, his favorables going down, his unfavorables going up. Not just this polling firm, but many other firms are finding the Liberal lead is growing larger and larger. Now, I should caution, whenever we see a very large Liberal lead recently, something usually is happening with the United States. That is happening all over again. The Ambassador Bridge, of course, in the news with the bridges in Windsor. Of course, the president has set a new deadline for tariffs with Canada. When it gets going tough, we see the Liberal numbers spike when we see U.S.-American conflict. So it's possible once this deal is reached, I hope a deal is reached anyway, a good deal, hopefully for Canada, that the numbers could come back down a little bit. But right now, everything is trending in the wrong direction. At the same time, the Conservatives are going to start facing some pretty big tests. One of those tests is the by-election taking place in Quebec right now. Conservative MP in Quebec quit in order to join the Senate, which is a good promotion for him because now he doesn't have to worry about the voters. But that means a by-election from Pierre Poilievre in a seat that his party almost lost last election. So are they able to retain that seat? Or will they come in second place? Or could they come in third place? That's going to be a big question coming up very early at the end of August, I should say, on the 31st. And then another test now in Brantford-Brant Six Nations, where MP Larry Brock has resigned. This is more of a safe Conservative seat. This is a seat the Conservatives should be able to win pretty easily. But we are seeing with these large Liberal leads and the numbers for Ontario in the national polling, Liberals leading by 10, 12, sometimes 13%, sometimes as low as 8%. Could they be able to make that seat competitive? And if they are able to win, what does that mean for Pierre Poilievre's leadership? So I think he has two big tests coming up, one coming up in Quebec, one later in Ontario. And only time will tell how he performs.
Yeah, that'll be quite interesting to watch, and as you mentioned, hopefully we get a good deal. Depends who you ask, what's the definition of a good deal. I don't think so. The 0% tariffs is clearly off the table. I think Canada is looking what the UK got, around 10%, maybe 10, 12, 13%, around that number. There's no way we can get 0%. So let's see. I think these are some tough times. Ramonaji, your take on what's happening at the federal level. What are the chances of Pierre Poilievre really putting up a good fight, or maybe will he be able to win the elections for the Conservatives? They've been in the opposition for many years. I think last they won the election in 2011. Of course, they were there till 2015, but it's almost 15 years ago they won an election. So have they really won an election recently? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, today it was announced on CTV News. They interviewed about 17 Conservative caucus members from different regions in Canada. And some of these MPs were granted anonymity, to discuss internal party politics concerning what's happening. And they spoke very candidly, according to the CTV news. And several also reported that they questioned whether Pierre Poilievre can defeat Prime Minister Mark Carney. And some of them even said that they're facing potentially very competitive races. And they're also fearing that, if Pierre Poilievre could cost them their seats. And so this is huge, saying that this announcement, this release, this news release. And so certain of these MPs said that they doubt that they'll be able to lead the party into the next federal election. So it doesn't sound so good when you're hearing this sort of candid conversation with media about your party's electability, about your own electability in your own seat, and whether the Conservatives have a chance against Mark Carney. So this is quite concerning, even though, you have Pierre Poilievre, who received an 87.4% support back in January 2026 leadership review. It's still, the only other option is if 17 MPs, I don't know out of how many out of the 17, stated this. It's not clear in that sense, but the only other opportunity would be, if they're really that concerned, is that it would be a caucus vote, right? What they did to Aaron O'Toole, right? He went into a caucus meeting, he came out no longer the leader of the Conservative Party. So even though Pierre Poilievre was able to get his support in terms of the leadership review with the Conservative members, the only other opportunity is with caucus. And so now when you're hearing this type of news, is caucus planning something? And to what time? Like, what's the time frame, right? Because you have Prime Minister Mark Carney, he's had 13 by-elections in 2 years, right? The last time a Canadian Prime Minister had to face something like that was like 75 years ago. So he's had a lot of by-elections to deal with in such a short period of time. And so is he going to, based on how these by-elections go, and yes, the closest ones, 3 ridings by August 31st, if they don't go well, is he going to call a general election? If so, then there's no time to go into a Conservative leadership election. So they will go into an election with Pierre Poilievre as the leader. And, Pierre Poilievre was doing great in the polls when it was against Justin Trudeau. But unfortunately, with Mark Carney, his policies he's like a red Tory. He axed the carbon tax, he's capping when it comes to carbon tax in terms of 2 pipelines. And so there's a lot of things that you have this Prime Minister Mark Carney do that are a lot of Conservative policies. So it becomes very hard as a Conservative leader to really compete with an incumbent Prime Minister who has adopted a lot of Conservative policies and has moved very far to the center, where Justin Trudeau was very to the left, and with his pact with the NDP, Jagmeet Singh at the time, having a lot of those type of progressive, liberal policies, Mark Carney's moved the party to the center. And so it becomes a lot harder. I mean, you had 4 Conservative MPs cross the floor and become Liberals because now they can identify with the Liberal Party, and also, mind you, some of their own concerns of why they crossed, because Mark Carney every day sounds a lot more conservative. And so that's the state of affairs. And so we'll be seeing what happens in these, upcoming by-elections. There's going to be more called because there's more vacancies. But let's see, is Prime Minister Mark Carney going to be able to hold on to a slim majority, or is he going to have to do something big like call a general election? I don't know when that would be, but it would be a very short time for the Conservative caucus to do anything. And what's very concerning is that they're speaking to the media, and we're talking about it right now about how they feel.
Yeah. I've interviewed Pierre Poilievre many times, and I've asked a few questions all the time. One of them is definitely foreign policy. And the reason I would always ask foreign policy, of course, at the federal level, the pocketbook issues are again very, very important for everyone. But I think now here we are. I mean, the foreign policy, that issue, Trump, that has played out in the recent elections, that we've seen even in the provincial level, we've seen that. Not that Bonnie wasn't asking the right questions. She did talk about so many relevant questions, but they didn't resonate because the Trump factor. And that's exactly what happened at the federal level as well. So I think the foreign policy plays a very important role, not all the time, but this time it does. I've asked him about immigration, but I think the Conservatives, this is what I got from Pierre Poilievre. If I would say, I've lost the count, but maybe last 8 or 10 recent interviews with Pierre Poilievre, the immigration thing. Now here we have the Liberal government clearly saying this, we're reducing the number of immigrants we're bringing. The foreign policy, they're very clear. I mean, he set the tone at an international stage with his Davos speech. And then, but this is a word out that he wrote the speech himself. He woke up early morning. He spent 2 hours writing the speech himself. So, and he's become the poster boy of, Europe and Canada, or even at the global stage, someone who can really, if not elbows up, but someone who's really challenging President Trump. So I think the Conservatives, in my viewpoint, I think they missed the bus on so many different issues, whether it was immigration, affordability. You didn't say anything out of the ordinary, all regular stuff on affordability, nothing really on the foreign policy. Were you really concerned you would be labeled anti-immigrant? But yes, everyone was questioning. I mean, from the provincial level to the municipal level, I have many mayors, almost every single mayor pointed out this very candidly in all my interviews at Y City. They said, you know what, we're bringing in the immigrants, but support us. So that's the question. And here we have the Liberals clearly saying this. I've heard Prime Minister Mark Carney himself clearly saying this. We're reducing the numbers now. We're bringing in, less temporary foreign workers or international students. So they're clearly highlighting this, that there's a cut in the immigration, and the numbers are coming out. CBS is deporting more people who are illegally here than ever. So I think one thing we have to give it to Carney, and the other thing is, he's all about bringing in investment. So we are bringing in investment. He's turned the relationship around with India, with China, with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar, with the UAE, Australia, Japan, and with Europe as well.
This is a very serious guy. And, the former prime minister, did a lot of things that people liked and did a lot of things that people really disliked. But, Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney are polar opposites. They're both Liberals. They're both in the Liberal Party of Canada, but they have very different approaches, very different styles, a very different substance, right? And I think Pierre Poilievre was, built his campaign and his persona in such a way that he could be very successful against Justin Trudeau. And then they swapped goalies and they said, you're out and Mark Carney is in. And, it's been a very different race ever since. I think for people who are looking for stability, who want an understanding of economics, when Pierre Poilievre says that Mark Carney doesn't understand economics, this is not going to go anywhere. People understand that this guy was in banking, that he was the central banker for Canada and for the United Kingdom. You're not going to convince people he doesn't understand how to do math or how to do economics, right? It's not going to work. I think there are lines of attack that make the Liberal government vulnerable. I think we don't have a deal with the United States yet, and that was part of the platform that the Liberals ran on. Again, affordability concerns are only going to get worse. We are not seeing the sticker shock at the supermarkets yet that the economists have predicted. We are being told those are coming later on in the fall, October and November. When you're putting together Thanksgiving, are you going to see a big jump in the costs, depending on what you're deciding to eat, of course? And who do you blame for that? And do you not blame the Liberal government because you understand it's really Donald Trump and his tariffs and all these different things that are creating problems? The Strait of Hormuz, which we've been following all very closely, so many impacts of that in terms of the pricing regime still to come. And I think it's worth understanding, some of these inflationary pressures when we see the price of tomatoes from Mexico, when we see the cost of wheat going up, all these different factors. The Canadian government is not to blame directly for them. It is because of this international conflict. But do everyday voters understand this when they go shopping and when they fill up their gas, right? This is the question that I think is going to become more pertinent as we get closer. And do those same voters believe that Pierre Poilievre would be able to do any differently? That's the real question for him. And I think they've asked him now, 100 times. You say you're going to get a deal with Donald Trump, you get a better deal than what Mark Carney could get. How would you do it? And we haven't really heard a good explanation yet, right? It's a hard argument to make if you're Pierre Poilievre. How do you prove a hypothetical? Very, very tough, but I think that's why you're seeing the numbers you're seeing now.
Yeah, and just to add further to your point, in all those interviews that I did with Pierre Poilievre, that was one thing, I wanted to understand a little bit more, that how would you do anything differently than what It's all the issues haven't gone away. Even during the last federal elections, these issues were all there. I mean, we had these issues of affordability, crime, immigration. Of course, the numbers are down now, but have things improved substantially? I doubt so. And you're right. I mean, we haven't. Where are the elbows now? We haven't had a deal now. So which was promised, the deal would be there. And there are so many other fronts as well where I think the Liberals haven't. Look at their cabinet as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were, and this is the first time in the last 25 years I've been openly calling out on the Liberal Minister for Immigration. I mean, she has to be moved out. She has to be dropped. I've said this very openly. It's the first time I'm naming a cabinet minister. She has to be. I mean, what are you doing over there? I don't even know what she's doing. Where is our Minister of Sport? I mean, we had a once in a lifetime opportunity. We hosted the FIFA Soccer World Cup. I think it's a wasted opportunity. But then I think the challenge for the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, is how does he do anything differently? I mean, of course, they have their ideas about, reducing the crime, but are they resonating well with the voters? I don't know. Ramana, your take on all this?
Yeah, I mean, the latest numbers came out of the fundraising efforts for Q2 of 2026, and consistently Conservatives are leading significantly, and the Liberals have caught up. The latest numbers are the Conservatives raised $5.1 million, right, from 33,000 contributors, and then you have the Liberals that raised 4.4 million from 33,000 contributors. So needless to say that Conservatives have always been better with their fundraising operations. And so, it doesn't mean that there's not enough support for the Conservative movement, which, these numbers show that there is, even though the Liberals are doing better than before under Mark Carney when it comes to fundraising. But the reality is that, it is hard. To David's point is that, yeah, I mean, this Mark Carney came from, private citizen to a politician, was never a school board trustee or a councillor or a mayor or an MPP or a premier or an MP or really anything, and just became the Prime Minister of Canada, is because he came at a time where Canadians were looking for someone who knows how to navigate around the economy, and at a time where you had President Trump come back into a second term, and before he was even elected, and actually on his inauguration talked about 25% tariffs on Canada. So what that created was an opportunity for Mark Carney to have that visibility, being the incumbent at the time Prime Minister, and just really sucking all the oxygen in the room when it comes to visibility for Canadians looking at him, to what they're going to do with tariffs and the media coverage. And again, we're at the same phase, right, with this 50% tariffs that are looming by the 19th of August, and then the whole Kuzma issue. But at the same time, you have what you just mentioned about, Mark Carney being able to revive relationships with other countries and have trade agreements. What I'm going to say to that is that it's not that hard, given that what Justin Trudeau did in terms of our relationship with other countries, and really that's a whole nother topic, is that other countries look at Canada because we are one of the richest countries in the world, right? We have abundance of natural resources, we have 3 oceans, we're not a country that can be invaded, we're not a country that goes to war, we have a highly educated population, and so everything for Canada is on its way up. Right. I mean, and now that we're having some of these policies that are looking at how to make Canada more competitive on the world stage when it comes to, LNG, gas and oil, natural resources, and everything else in between, other countries want to have trade agreements with Canada. It's just, unfortunately, we didn't have proper leadership beforehand to do some of these trade agreements. So I do have to say that, yes, great thing that we're having these take place right now, but was it really that hard? Because Canada is a super great country that every other country wants to trade with, and wants to actually, at some point, when immigration numbers were open, wanted to come and live in Canada. So there's those aspects there, right? But yeah, the writing's on the wall. Like, how is Pierre Poilievre going to compete with an incumbent prime minister who has adopted a lot of conservative policies, and he gets all the media attention and all the coverage because Canadians do want to know what's going to happen to Canada. And the bigger question is, like, yeah, if the United States is Canada's number one customer, right? 72% of exports go to the United States. How do you replace that one customer when that one customer doesn't want to? It's going to add massive tariffs, which makes you not that competitive. Yes, you have other trading partners that you will diversify with, but you can't really replace that, you know, customer of that takes 72% of your exports. So that's going to be the biggest thing looming on Carney's shoulders. But if there is an election going to be called at some point, Carney can say, look at all the other things I've done in the meantime, that Canada will be in a different situation in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Which we're seeing the groundwork being put in with the policies and the investment dollars that are being placed. And so here you have it. And you know, for a first time politician, he's quite Machiavellian. What he did in the riding in that's up for by-election in end of this month, right? It's a big deal to be able to remove a conservative MP, make him a senator, and really open it up to take one more seat for the Liberals. The latest polls that came out, the Liberals are competing with the Bloc, right? So it's quite significant seeing all the things he's done. You know, coming from a person who was all about carbon tax, he rode high on AXA carbon tax, which was literally the conservative policy for the last 2 years before that general election. And then he's consistently, you know, shown up, did a deal with the premier of Alberta, and, you know, carbon capture, reduced it, extended its timeline, and then targeted it to pipelines. And so the way he's operating, it doesn't seem like he's a first-time politician, but I guess he learns fast and he's quick. And he has shown that what he said prior to being a politician on his views on the environment, he's doing different things. And so it's very hard when you have almost two conservative leaders that you have to actually vote for. And that's I stick to it. I mean, he's gone way to the center for the Liberals, and it seems to be having some sort of response rate when it comes to his polling numbers.
Great. Yeah. I think the biggest question that needs to be addressed is, you know, you mentioned about diversifying the trade. You know, I've been listening this for a good 25 years now, but now I think we're actually pursuing that. And I think they've also set a target of around $300 billion. I think around maybe $30 or $40 billion we are able to diversify. But to Ramanaji's point, you know, I mean, it's going to be very challenging to really replace U.S. You know, even 50% of the trade that we do with U.S. How do we, you know, diversify that quickly? It's a race against time. For us, my colleague Shubi, he travels with Prime Minister Mark Carney. He was there in India and Mumbai. You know, the financials cup there. He was in Switzerland. He was recently there with the Prime Minister at G7 summit. So wherever he goes, he does travel with him, and the insights that we get, you know, he's received well. I think he's touched down on close to 30 countries for now. If I think around that number, he's already touched on 30 countries, from Middle East to Asia to Europe to Australia, Japan, everywhere. But the challenge is that, you know, how would you replace US at that quick pace? That is the bigger question, you know. And in case I mean, if Trump says no deal or something goes horribly wrong on that side, then that could be a challenge for Mark Carney. I think this is the number one challenge for him.
I think so too, and I think we all want the Prime Minister to succeed.
Yeah.
And we all want the government to succeed. I don't think and that includes the Conservatives, by the way.
Yeah.
And the NDP. I do think they want to see a good deal for Canada. I think it becomes very challenging if there's a bad deal, especially because there are manufacturers who have said, you know, if these tariffs come in, they will have 3 months to shut down operations in some cases. They will not be able to compete if the cost of their product goes up by 15, 25, 50%, depending on what the tariff for their category might be. You've seen the government take steps to help the steel industry in Canada, removing charges from transportation on trains. If you're trying to buy or move Canadian steel, I think that's welcome, but still a lot to be accomplished. And we're in a race against time. I think if we're being critical, we should never have let this relationship with the United States be so dependent. We should have taken steps on this a long time ago. You've mentioned 25 years of trade diversification chatter. Well, we should have taken real action when we had a chance. We wouldn't be in this situation if we had done that. That being said, there's no time machine to go change the past. And I think to understand how hostile America became to Canada so quickly, you know, if we had told ourselves this 10 years ago, no one would have believed it. right? This is a country that has worked hand in hand with America on so many projects. We've had disagreements too, of course. We said no to the Iraq War. But September 11th, it was Canadians who took in so many Canadians, Americans, I should say, from across the country, and we fought together. We've died together. For them to do this sort of 180 so quickly, really, we did not see it coming. But even so, we should have understood that whether it's Republicans or Democrats, there's always going to be some level of trade protectionism. And we should have always felt it would be more desirable to trade with the world, right? So I think I'm glad we're taking steps. No matter who's in government, conservative or liberal, I hope those steps continue. But we need to do a lot more as quickly as possible. And it takes time to put these systems in place. But we are seeing investments in the Port of Vancouver and the Port of Montreal that will facilitate this increased trade.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've been listening this for the last good 2.5 decades now. Of course, in the last century, we had this CUSMA, worked well for Mexico, but then we shouldn't have been heavily reliant on that. That's number one. And we said no to the Iraq War. I clearly remember that Bush he flew all the way to Canada trying to pursue it but that wasn't a UN-sanctioned war.
Yeah.
And I think we did the right thing in saying no. There were no weapons of mass destruction over there. And then we fought. Besides U.S., the Afghan war, that wasn't our war, and we sacrificed our soldiers there. So we've been with U.S., we've been honoring our commitment as far as NATO, the defense commitment is concerned. And I was with our defense minister, Mr. David McGuinty, recently at an event there, and he was sitting just next to me, and we discussed at length how much Canada is investing in the defense sector. So I think we're matching U.S. on all fronts, but there was no reason for U.S. To attack us at the level that we've been witnessing recently. I don't know. I mean, look at other countries as well.
Yeah.
Many countries, they've gotten a fair deal now, and China doesn't care. President Trump has backtracked from there. For India, of course, it's a bit of a challenge. They haven't closed in on the trade deal, which they are hoping to close in by the end of this year. I'm not sure what will happen. But then there are other countries, the deals are pretty much settled, even if it's 11%, 12, 14. I think Pakistan is somewhere around 19, but it's pretty much settled. For Canada, the uncertainty, when I talk about the real estate market, of course, we've seen some, spike in the sale numbers. And I think Toronto is almost heading towards a balanced market. There are not that many listings coming up now. But then one factor, it's uncertainty. Who would invest in a country where there is uncertainty? The investment, as much as we're talking about investment. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and listen, the President Trump has been very clear. He wants to destroy our auto industry.
Yeah.
He wants us to be the 51st state. He wants us to be, if not in official title, he wants a vassal state, right? I think it's very important to remember that Canadians have shown over decades and decades and decades that when we are wanting to do the right thing, we can go out and do it. Second World War, it was Canadians who went off before the United States, but also it was Canadian supply chains that were able to supply, a lot of people don't know this, but it was the Canadian supply chains that were able to supply the vehicles, the bullets, the arms that were required for the war effort. I do think we need to do more as well of that in Canada now, build our own supply chains for weapons and for different mechanics and things that we'll need if there's armed conflict, not just for ourselves, but also for our allies. I know that we are doing a lot of drone investment right now, a lot of Canadian drones being sold to Ukraine. And I think we need to see more of this development. It's good for our economy, but it's also good for our allied partners who need our expertise in creating things that are very advanced, right? We have incredible engineers here, not just in Toronto, but also at Waterloo. We have some of the sharpest minds that exist in the whole world. So if they want to tackle some of these challenges, I think we should see more of those exports take place. But again, it will take time to rebuild these systems. I think it's encouraging. Canada, it looks like it's going to be part of that new effort from the Europeans to really create more weapon supply and stocks. I think that's very encouraging for the economy, but there's more to do. Only so much time. And to be fair, this is not something that just happened under the last Liberal government. This has been plaguing us for a very long time. It's been decades and decades of too much dependence on the United States.
Yeah, just to quickly add before I head towards Monaji back again, you mentioned, there's a lot of talent here. I agree, but then we're losing a lot of talent to US as well. whether they were born in Canada. Many of my friends, I just did bachelor's. I didn't do master's, but many of my friends, after doing bachelor's in engineering, they did masters from Waterloo and other areas from Wayne State. And I would say, if I know 100 engineers, I would say 90 plus of them who moved to Canada, they're all gone to States.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we're seeing some reshoring, just to be fair. We're seeing some people coming back because they don't like what's happening in the United States. And we're seeing some provinces, British Columbia in particular, very successful in luring healthcare professionals, nurses and doctors from the United States, from people who are seeing what is happening under the new regime, as we call it. And they are unhappy, right? They want a country that is going to prioritize the well-being of people and not just essentially corporate profits. And they're moving with their feet. They're showing that they want to be in our country instead. I think for our healthcare system, that's very good news. And hopefully Ontario can lure some of these health professionals back too. So British Columbia is really showing a good program with this right now.
Yeah. And just another point I wanted to make, I've been discussing this for many years because I worked in an auto sector for a good 7 years. We haven't built our own indigenous car. We should have done that. I mean, China, look at China, from BYD to so many of EVs that, they built sufficient EVs domestically and to serve China, and they're exporting a lot of EVs as well. So Canada, we don't have our own car, so that's why the decision making is not done here. India with Nano, Tata, not only they build their own car, but then their auto giants are also buying, like Land Rover, Jaguar, Range Rover. Tata has bought all that. So you go to UK, you're buying Land Rover, Jaguar, and all that, and they have their own indigenous cars. So here is China, then Japan, Germany, from South Korea. They're having their own cars. So I think Canada should have its own brand of at least a couple of cars. Would have helped. Ramona ji, your take.
Yeah, I think, President Trump is a blessing in disguise. It's painful process, but what he did was, coming back, being elected for a second term, he gave Canadians a big slap in the face, a punch in the gut, and a big kick in the behind to really reevaluate what are we doing. We have the richest country. We have everything at our disposal. There's nothing Canada lacks in any capacity compared to other countries. And yet it's underutilized, and we've become too dependent on just having a secure trade agreement where we have one customer and that customer takes, 70 to 75% of our exports. It's like any business. Imagine if you're running a business today and you have one client that brings in 75% of your revenues, you have to ask yourself, like, what happens if that customer goes away, right? How do you replace that? And so we didn't ask ourselves that because we just thought, hey, we have this agreement, and our supply chains are so integrated. Like you just talked about the auto industry, right? A portion of a piece of item will go across Mexico, United States, and Canada multiple times before it's put into as a part of the vehicle. So, we thought, okay, we have it. We have our assembly lines, we have our plants, we have our unions, we have our trade agreements. This is the letter of the law. And it took someone like Trump to come and say, yeah, I don't like it. I'm not going to renew it. I'm going to cancel it. Oh, I'm going to reenact the 1930, tariff thing that he's doing right now, which is the 50%, right? Which bypasses CUSMA, essentially. For any item that's protected under CUSMA, it would still be exposed on this August 19th deadline. So it is a blessing in disguise. It's been painful, but it's made us wake up, in a very hard and fast way, and acknowledge, like, what are we doing? Like, what is our big plan? Why have we been so reliant on another country where they can say these things to us and there's nothing we can do about it? We can send them all our politicians to go have meetings, to go negotiate, to have leverage, but are we our biggest asset is our oil and gas industry when it comes to the United States, right? Even that, we have one customer, right? 90% of Canadian oil goes to the United States, and there's a pipeline, right? From Alberta down south. So we're not going to shut that off because we need that. So really every leverage point we don't have. So I think this has been a great lesson for us Canadians, but I think it's also a lesson we can take away in our personal lives. Like in our personal lives, evaluate, like, are you able to provide more for the people you're around? You know, should you step up in many ways, or are you at a disadvantage where you essentially need, and you're in a situation where, you know, you're relying on others the most. And if, for example, if that one customer that brings 75% of your revenues goes away, then what do you do? So I think it's also a personal lesson to really reevaluate our lives. How are we behaving? If it's your business, take a look at your books, right? Diversify, be a type of provider that people can't say, sorry, I don't need it. And then you go from 75% to zero overnight. So yeah, so that's why it's a blessing in disguise, because it put us all into election mode, right? We replaced a prime minister, we brought a private citizen, made him a prime minister, and you know he's been doing certain things that we'll see the results of. It's going to take time. It's not going to be overnight, but the groundwork is being laid, and we'll see who's going to be the challenger to that. What the Conservatives will do. Will they have better ideas? We don't know, but I think what it means is Canadians are open to listen, right? And it also has shown that we're going past what we want as politicians, right? Like we saw this in the United States with Trump being a private citizen and also becoming president. And then we're now seeing that in Canada with Mark Carney becoming prime minister, right? And somebody like Pierre Poilievre, who's been a politician and MP for 20 years, he didn't even win his own seat in the general election last year. So we're seeing the voters really move towards wanting something new, and now it's to be seen what will happen. And now will the voter base say, okay, well, Mark Carney's tried his best, even if he can't, you know, Kuzma deadline came and went July 1st. Now we're in this annual review period, negotiation period, which is not great for business. It's not great for investments. It's not great for any sort of projections. If you're running a business, you can't be in a situation where year to year you don't know if there's going to be tariffs in your industry, which prevents you from investing in whether it's you have a warehouse or capacity in resources and staffing. So it's very troubling times, of course, to say the least. But at the end of the day, I think this is like the medicine, you know, like when you're sick and you have to take medicine that tastes really bad, but it's good for you because you're going to get better. This is the transition Canada's going in. And I have full confidence that in the next 5 to 10 years, Canada's going to be in a much better situation because we've gone through this hard times right now. And I think we can talk about all the negatives, but, you know, I have to lean a little bit on the positives is that I think this whole support Canada first movement has been fantastic. We've removed our interprovincial trade barriers, and we're saying, how can we have more Canadian consumers consuming Canadian products, right? So we're like this whole announcement on steel. Okay, great. But we're also seeing it with some of the other products in Canada as well to make sure that, you know, we're able to support ourselves. And so now, even though President Trump was elected on America First, what he actually created in Canada is Canada First. Less Canadians are crossing the border to go to the United States for vacation. Less Canadians are investing in the United States. And also, you know, there's this entire, like, if you're in a grocery store, if you're in a department store and you see the Canadian flag on a product, you're going to pick it up because you want to support Canadian businesses. So I think it's been great in terms of taking a look at where we're at and planning for a better future, but also this level of solidarity that we have for each other. I think it's been fantastic. So, you know, and it's just, it is what it is right now. And we're going to do our best to cover every inch of what comes out of these talks. But it is what it is right now.
Yeah. I think now our final topic for the day would be the provincial politics. Welcome back to Ymedia Political Sensex, and now we'll be talking about our provincial politics here. There's lots happening as far as the provincial politics is concerned. The Liberals are going to pick up their new leader. We just saw the candidates debate. We'll talk about that as well. But more importantly, 3 by-elections have been announced for September the 3rd, York Simcoe, Scarborough Southwest, and Hamilton East Stony Creek. So all these 3 ridings will be very interesting to watch. And Lyson poll, they have come out with new numbers as far as the numbers are concerned for the Ontario Liberals, PC. Ford's numbers are not very encouraging. I see that. I want you to take the lead, David, on this one. I don't think so. We've had the Conservatives, the PCs win a majority. And here we are, the numbers, the Liberals, as per your poll survey, the Liberals are having a lead. Of course, there is expense scandal, but I don't think so. When this poll was done, we had the Bonnie Crombie issue at that time. Please.
So no Bonnie Crombie issue when this poll was done, but this was done right after the expense scandals for the hotels. We're learning, of course, that the PCs also build their own associations for luxury trips, hotels out of province, very expensive restaurants in the city of Toronto, and so on and so forth. But, I always say that the trend is more important than any one particular poll. And, we're very lucky that, in the last election, we were the most accurate polling firm for Ontario. I like to remind people about this. In October, we saw the Conservatives with a massive lead over the Liberals. But ever since October, every month, sometimes it's 2 points, sometimes it's 3 points, sometimes it's 1 point, they've been trending downward. And that was all sort of standard and uniform. Then came the decision to announce the purchase of a private jet. And that is where we saw a big dip in support, both for Doug Ford's approval ratings, but also for the voting intentions for the PC party. And ever since then, they've been recovering a little bit, but it seems like every time they recover, a new story comes out. And it reminds people about the expense scandal and the private jet all over again. Of course, we've been seeing a lot of conversation about Billy Bishop Airport. I've maintained for a long time, the faster this airport goes away, the better it is for Doug Ford. Because of course, the plan was for him to fly his private jet out of Billy Bishop Airport. And in order for him to fly his new jet out of Billy Bishop, they would have to expand the runway for the jets. These stories, I think it's very hard to hear airport and not think private jet, or think runway, or think, parachute. These are all words that are intermingled, right? Very, very difficult to strip them away and have them in individual components. We're going to see these 3 by-elections, as you mentioned, Scarborough Southwest. I think will be a competitive race. The Liberals and NDP seem to be trying very hard to win. PC's trying hard as well, but this is not a seat that they are usually competitive in. They haven't held this seat for quite some time. Hamilton East Stony Creek, this is a progressive conservative seat that's in danger. NDP running a star candidate in former MPP Monique Smith. Liberals running the candidate they had last time, who only lost by 9 points. So this is a very interesting race as well. And then York Simcoe, this is safer territory. This is where Caroline Mulroney, who was a cabinet minister, resigned. Much safer. This is more rural Ontario. Should be a good hold for the PCs, but we need to watch the margin, see what the margin is for the race, and is she able to, the new candidate, who is a member of the PC Running Association, is she going to be able to hold on to the seat with the same level of support as Caroline Mulroney? It will be very hard because by-elections are a lot more fickle. It's a lot more interesting. I think one by-election that might be helpful to look at for Hamilton is the by-election that took place previously, Kanata Carleton. This happened when the Liberals had no permanent leader. So that's a very important similarity. We're in the same situation now. This was a PC seat. The cabinet minister was Marilee Fullerton. In Hamilton, we had Neil Lumsden, who was the minister and resigned. And the expectation was that the Liberals would do very well. They did well. They won the seat in Kanata Carleton, but it was the NDP who were second place and really surprised everyone. PC party came in third. So are we going to see something similar in Hamilton, or will that end up being a Liberal PC race? I think that will be very interesting to watch.
Wow, thank you for sharing those points. Yeah, these are going to be competitive races, especially the Scarborough Southwest. I guess it's going to be very competitive. York, Simcoe as well. And you're right, the Hamilton East Stony Creek because of the star candidate. Your take, Ramonaji, please go ahead.
It'll be very interesting to see how this unfolds. I mean, it is going to be competitive. York Simcoe is going to be PC, but I think where we're going to see the PCs try to win would be Scarborough Southwest and try to retain and hold Hamilton East Stony Creek. But it's interesting because anytime we've seen consistently in the polling numbers, like Liberals seem to, even though they don't have a leader right now, they seem to do better than the NDPs in the polling. Which, David, I'd love to hear what you think is really happening. Every time there's polling, you have the PCs that are leading, and then you have the Liberals. Maybe it's just the brand has more name recognition, perhaps, if that's why, because of the federal Liberals, I'm not sure. But it's always very interesting to see that the NDP is the official opposition, but in polling, they always usually come around the third.
Yeah. And what do you think, as you were mentioning, Liberals, they haven't even elected a leader now. So say, for instance, once they have a leader in place, it could be anybody. Do you think this Liberals could go even stronger?
Well, I think the real risk is that they're going to lose the support they have now.
Why?
Because right now, choose your own adventure. Who is the Liberal leader? There is none. So you can imagine the most perfect person in the world that is the Liberal leader. One thing we know is going to happen is the Liberals will have a vote, and they're going to choose someone. And the next thing we know is going to happen is the PC party is going to use all the money it fundraised to launch a very aggressive advertising campaign against whoever the Liberal leader is. They are going to get the same treatment Stephen Del Duca got. They are going to get the same treatment Bonnie Crombie got, which is $1 million advertising campaign explaining to Ontarians why this is the wrong person to lead Ontario. So for me, they are leading today. That's nice, but there's no election today. There's no leader today. Let's see how they do once they actually choose someone, and the Conservative Party has its chance to tell Ontarians, hey, here's what you should think about this person.
Yeah. Mona, your take. Once that's a very interesting thing that David put. You could choose whoever the perfect person on this planet, but then at the end of the day, yeah, we saw a lot of attack ads. And Ford, he's already mentioned that when he was asked, Navdeep Bains or anybody else, they could become the new Liberal leader. So Ford has already mentioned for Navdeep Bains in particular, bring it on. I mean, he said it. He's ready, and you're right. The whole Tory machinery will be at play once we have the new leader. A lot of attack ads. I don't know what will be at play. Yeah.
Well, they're going to need to, right? Because to win a third election for the PCs, that was a big deal. But to go into a fourth election and win a majority, that's going to be highly unlikely. So what they're going to need to do is, as soon as there is a Liberal leader, they're going to have to brand that Liberal Ontario leader for the Liberal Party and brand him essentially, or her, and to do attack ads, because they're going to want to position themselves, because really the question begs, is Ontario going to ever elect an NDP premier again? And is it really going to be a toss-up between PCs for another fourth term, or is it going to be the Liberals coming up? Given that federally we see Mark Carney, consistently leading in terms of, for the Liberal brand. So there you have it. So the PCs, the only way forward is to make sure that they're able to create the narrative for the new Liberal leader, which is going to be, November 21st. That's when we'll know when there's going to be the next leader, and take it from there. But it's going to be very hard. It's going to be harder for the PCs for a fourth election with some of the scandals, and it's consistent. And it goes back to what we said earlier on in this discussion, is that, there's the incumbent, and voters are asking, is there a real challenger to the incumbent, because they're getting tired of incumbency and they're looking for a really strong challenger to be able to come up and have some options. So we'll see what that means for Ontario elections moving forward.
Okay, we got to call it a wrap here, but before I do so, same question for both of you. We'll start with you, Ramonaji, this time. Do you think Ford will go to federal politics?
Yes, I know personally that he wanted to get into federal politics before he even considered provincial politics. Essentially, he was ready to run a mayoral election, and this is back in 2018. And then it was after then PC leader Patrick Brown stepped down, and then it created a vacuum. But back then, Ford was running for mayoral election against Tory. And then it created this opportunity to run provincially. And then we knew that back then the Liberals were there for 15 years. We knew it was going to be a wave for the PCs, and he secured the leadership, and then he was in. So, but prior to that, he's always had ambitions for running federally, and that's not a secret. He's, many people know about that. So it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. With now Pierre Poilievre, we'll see where his future lies, whether the caucus will do something, given that 17 MPs have talked to, mainstream media about how they feel about their leader. But if he goes into a next election and if Pierre Poilievre does not do well, meaning if he doesn't get majority, then yeah, it'll open up a position forward to have a leadership election for the Conservative Party. The only drawback here is that, well, let's talk about the positives first. Positive being that Ontario has the most number of seats federally. So Ford is the most recognizable name in Ontario. He can probably pick up, a lot of memberships and seats in terms of votes when it comes to ridings in Ontario and potentially maybe Quebec and Saskatchewan and possibly Manitoba. But then you also have the question of like he doesn't speak French and chances of him learning French are not going to happen. And that's the interesting part where you see now Prime Minister Mark Carney really always talk about French, right? Like we just replaced the CEO of Air Canada because he didn't speak French, right? And rightly, wrongly, however way your opinion on that is, it is a bilingual country, and we've seen Prime Minister Mark Carney really up his French in last year or so because he became a prime ministerial candidate. So that's going to be one of the things against him where he won't be able to do French debates. So is the question, if Ford decides to run federally, if there is a vacancy for leadership, is he able to sell memberships? Yes. Is he going to be the most well-known brand in Canada? Yes. But then the disadvantages will be, he won't be able to do any French debates. It'll be hard in Quebec ridings. And so, yeah, so there's that. And then the other question is, is he going to run a fourth term as the PC leader? That's going to be quite hard to go into a fourth election. And then if he doesn't run for federal leadership and he doesn't run a fourth election, is he going to try to run for mayor again? Which I don't know, will be unlikely. So, and what we've seen is that once you're a politician for quite some time, it seems like politicians keep coming back and running other elections. And so we'll see what his fate has for him in terms of what he decides. But we've seen the legwork that's been done with, Corey Teneycke being his campaign manager in the last 3 elections provincially. And we know Corey Teneycke comes from the federal government side. He used to work for Stephen Harper and he openly challenged Jenny Burns, who was the campaign manager of Pierre Poilievre in last year's general election. And that usually doesn't happen that publicly. So we know that, some of the pieces have been placed, but now will Ford take the opportunity if it were to present itself? That's to be known, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does.
Okay. And David?
Well, I think it really depends on how the next parts of the term really go. Right now, there is an expense scandal with the ministers who charged hotels, even though they live in Toronto and Peel Region, rather than just drive home. And ministers have drivers, right? They're not even asking them to drive home. They can just get in the car and someone will drive it for them. But rather than do that, they decided to book these very expensive hotels. The government says that the expenses have been repaid. The journalists have asked for proof of this. They cannot provide proof. The riding associations have been used as people's personal piggy banks. The donations from donors used for air travel, resorts, all these different things, luxury restaurants. Again, the PC party saying that there will be repayments, but no evidence of such. There's a whole bunch of more issues coming down the pike. The premier addressing the AI data center issue yesterday with what I think it's a very good plan to protect communities from electricity rates, from the AI data centers and all these other things. There's positive news happening as well. But I think that brand that the Ford government has had and that Doug Ford has had about, standing up for the little guy, fiscal responsibility, and this idea that he's not going to misspend your money. Might do a lot of different things, might not do precisely what you want on healthcare or education, but this is someone who knows how to watch a dollar. That brand has really taken a beating, and really it was the private jet that was a catalyst for this, because we're coming back to that word, affordability. People are having a really hard time at home, and especially seniors on fixed incomes. We are seeing reports they are having a really difficult time, figuring out when they can turn on the air conditioning in some cases because they're scared of that electricity bill that's going to come down the pipeline. And so all of this adds up to, is he able to recover? And we've seen him recover before, to be fair. these numbers are almost as bad as the ones during the Greenbelt scandal. But he eventually bounced back from Greenbelt, right? And was able to recover. Is he able to get past this really tough summer? And will we see better numbers in the fall? Or is this just, Ontarians have had this government for a long time. They think it's time for change. If he comes out of this wounded, it's hard to see him becoming federal leader. But this is someone who has a lot of talent, doesn't speak French. That's the big problem, but who is a really talented politician.
Great. Some very interesting thoughts on this. And I think that's all the time that we have today. David, thank you so much for your time. Sorry, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes. So David, to your points there, that would possibly be an issue in a general election. But when it comes to a leadership race, when it comes to a conservative base, he's one of the most recognizable names. So when it comes to a leadership election, it's really, can you raise the memberships and can you mobilize voters? And so I'm looking at the MP like the Conservative caucus. None of them really have that level of name recognition in Canada and Canadian politics like Ford does. So aside from like what's bagged the PCs in the last little while, it's not going to matter until there's like a general election and he has a proper opposition. What for a leadership election, it'll just be, can you raise memberships? Do people know you? Will they give you money? And can you mobilize them to vote by the deadline? And can he do those things? Yes, he can. And who will be his biggest challenger for a leadership election with the Conservatives? I don't know I don't know who's more popular than him in the Conservative political circles in terms of like for Canadian voters as well as Canadian Conservative members, right? Because you don't need to be a citizen to become a member of a political party and vote for a leader. So valid points, but I think that stuff is not going to affect him in a leadership because there's really not many challengers. But then also, you're right, he's also very talented. He's able to come back up. Like, 2018, he got elected, wasn't so popular with nurses and teachers and everything else. COVID came around, he became Mr. Popular. So yeah, he's super talented when it comes to retail politics. And so it'll be seen. And by then, when you go from like a leadership election to by the time it's for a general election, there's lots of time to be had. So that's just a point I wanted to raise before we end.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, fair point. That's a good point. It'll be different when it comes to leadership race. It's a different ballgame altogether when it comes to the federal politics. But I've heard many of his supporters really saying that if there is this is his supporters. Obviously there is supporters. There's some inherent bias there. They're saying if there is one person who can become the prime minister of this country without really practicing on French, then this is the guy. This is what the supporters claim. So, but then. We don't know, so at least both of you agree that he's quite talented, but there are challenges as well. So we'll see. I think it gets very interesting from here on. At Ymedia Political Sensex, we will carry on the discussion. Thank you so much, Ramonaji. Thank you so much, David. That's all the time that we have today. Stay tuned with Ymedia. Thank you.
Ymedia.
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 Stay tuned with Ymedia.